The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. The Radical. Fundamental principles. The Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. All right, we got two topics today, of course, but happy to take any questions from you guys. We're going to be talking about the outage in the Iranian nuclear facility today. Just a quick update on that, my thoughts on that, why it's happening, what exactly is going on, and of course we're going to talk about Tucker Carlson's comments about replacement. I'm reluctant to talk about this topic, this Tucker Carlson topic, because I don't know. I find the whole thing distasteful, and it brings out the best people into my comment section, just advertising this, and of course that is always fun. But have to do it because he said it, and because it made news, and because somebody's got to keep an eye out on what is going on the right. And I think, to a large extent, Tucker Carlson is a bellwether of the right. He is the future of the right, unfortunately, in this post-Trump era. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully better elements will rise up. But there we go. We got our first guy. He says, "I'm racist and proud. I also strongly believe in criticizing wrongdoing among the in-group." I have no idea what. Yep. Anyway, yes, the racists have showed up. I put Tucker Carlson, I put replacement theory in the title, and they came. Oh, God. All right. Let's see. And when I say racist, I do not mean as a compliment. I know some of you take it as one, but I do not mean it as it's like the lowest of the lowest forms of human being, in my view. But I will ignore the racists. I will try. It's hard for me, it's hard for me to ignore the comment section. Okay, so let's start with Iran. Let's start with the Iranian nuclear outage. So today, it was reported that the main nuclear facility in Iran had a major power outage. So the whole facility went dark. This is a facility the Iranians built quite a while back, and it's all built deep underground in order to, prevent it from being bombed into oblivion. It would be very difficult to destroy the nuclear facility from the air because it is so deeply underground, and it is so major layers of concrete. You would have to have one of these massive bombs or small tactical nuke, or some of these bunker buster bombs that the U.S. has. In order to do any kind of damage, you would have to bomb it in a sustained fashion. Again, with the exception of a tactical nuke, you'd have to bomb it in sustained fashion in order to wipe it out. So the alternative, of course, is to constantly just chip away at it with different ways of different damage you can do by shutting it down in strategic ways, by causing equipment damage, by putting a variety of different software worms and others that can slowly destroy the equipment within. The major equipment within are centrifuges that use uranium to enrich that uranium. Enriched uranium is what's necessary for a bomb, for the production of a bomb, and Iran is we know, using centrifuges in this facility deep underground to produce uranium, bond-grade, nuclear bomb-grade uranium for a nuclear weapon. So Israel would be my guess. I have no special knowledge here other than what the Israeli papers are reporting, and the Israeli papers are usually pretty well connected with Israeli intelligence and the Israeli military. So they're reporting that it's probably Israel that has caused this blackout, probably in an attempt to disrupt the work of these centrifuges. And if you can disrupt the work, often if they're spinning and you stop them, then you can destroy the centrifuges themselves. They spin out of control. The sudden stoppage causes the grease to break. They've done this before. They've hacked into the Iranian computer systems that run these centrifuges to destroy them. So it's quite likely that this is an Israeli attempt to cause real damage to the nuclear facility where it is. It's not clear how it was done, whether it was any kind of computer hack or whether this was some kind of sabotage of the electricity that supplies the nuclear facility. Hard to tell. But there's very little, I think, to suggest that this is not a military action against the Iranians. The Iranians themselves are not quite willing to admit that it was, but they're not willing to admit that it was an accident either. Either way, they look bad. If it's an accident, they look incompetent. And if it's an Israeli or an American attempt to take out the facility, then what are they going to do about it? Then they have to, it's kind of from their perspective, an act of war. Now, Israel does this constantly. Israel is constantly waging a covert war against the Iranians. They take out Iranian scientists. They take out Iranians responsible for the nuclear facility. They're constantly doing this. There was a major assassination of an Iranian scientist a few months ago in Tehran, in the capital of Iran. So this is constantly work that Israel is doing. By the way, it does these assassinations on behalf of the United States often. So there was an assassination of a high-ranking Al-Qaeda official inside Tehran, probably done by Israeli operatives on behalf of the Americans. So Israel operates within Iran. It has Mossad agents. It might have special forces on the ground, but it is constantly trying to chip away and destroy the Iranian nuclear capabilities. Now, Israel should be commended. I think this is the Iran developing nuclear weapons would be a disaster for the world at large. It would be a disaster not for the world at large, for those of us who believe in freedom and liberty in the world, for anybody who actually believes in any kind of semblance of freedom, given religious Islamic fanatics. Nuclear weapons could be a major disaster for Europe and for the United States and for Israel. So the fact that they're doing anything in their power to stop Iran from developing that bomb is good. Ideally, they would take on military operations and wipe out the Iranian capability of doing it. But for Israel, it's very difficult. It's far. You need, as I said, the bunker busting type bombs or tactical nukes. You've got a whole world that would be opposed to such a strike. And it's very difficult to do such a strike without the American without American support. So you would have to have an American administration that supported an Israeli strike. No American administration, including the Trump administration, has supported such a strike, and therefore the Israelis have not engaged in it. There were rumors that Israel had planes ready to go on several occasions to do such a strike, and they were forced back by the Bush administration, then by the Obama administration. With Trump, I don't think they ever tried. So if they can't take out the facilities through the air or through ground operations, remember, Iran is far away from Israel. It would be very difficult. It therefore is chipping away at their capabilities in whatever way they can. And in destroying their capacity to build that nuclear weapon. I think this is not a bad delay tactic. And in particular, right now, Israel is doing this, I think, in order to basically subvert as much as they can the Biden administration's effort to cut a deal with Iran. The Biden administration is in the process of negotiating with Iran, renegotiating the Obama deal, which was a terrible deal. And it is in the process of, cutting a deal whereby Iran promises not to develop nukes, a promise that is meaningless, and the United States lifts sanctions over Iran and allows Iran to recover economically from the sanctions placed on it by the Trump administration. It's not in America's interest to have such a deal. It's certainly not in Israel's interest to have such a deal. And therefore, Israel is, I think, the timing of this is, partially to piss off the Iranians so that they're not very pleasant to the Americans when they meet to negotiate, and pointing out to the Americans that Israel is not going to stop defending itself by undermining the ability of the Iranians to develop these nuclear weapons. So, interesting story coming out of Iran, one more in a whole string of activities that are geared towards stopping the Iranians from developing nukes. I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens as the Biden administration cuts a deal with Iran, and how Israel will respond, and what kind of deal they actually cut. My guess is it'll be worse probably than even the Obama deal, because Biden is so eager to have this deal that the Iranians will out-negotiate him easily. The people he's got doing this are the same people who negotiated the deal under Obama. That they didn't get a particularly good deal under Obama. There's no reason to think they're going to get any kind of decent deal under today. Same people, we're going to get similar results. The Iranians, if anything, are madder and are going to stick to their knitting and try to force as good of a deal for them as possible. Israel, as a consequence, is probably going to try to do whatever it can independently to undermine the Iranian capabilities. So, just thought I'd give you a quick update on what's happening there. Ultimately, the only thing that can, short of Israel doing it, the only thing that can stop the Iranians is American military action, which is not going to happen. Certainly not under Biden. It didn't even happen under Trump. Trump killed one Iranian general, and everybody thought he was a great hero. But what is required is much more than that. What is required is either the replacement of the Iranian regime by the Iranian people and support for that, or just the complete destruction of any infrastructure that would make possible the development of nuclear bomb. That is all possible. That is all doable by the American military, or by the Israelis if they got a clear thumbs up by the Americans, but highly, highly, highly unlikely to happen. You're much more likely to see these little actions that Israel takes to handicap the Iranians without actually destroying their capabilities. And we are likely one day to wake up, just like we did with the North Koreans, in 5-10 years, and Iran will have a bomb. Let's hope, my hope is that by then, the Iranian people will have overthrown the mullahs that rule them today. All right, while we're at it, if you like the show, and I see somebody's already given it the thumbs down because they don't like it. I expect a lot of thumbs down today. So I expect we'll have more of those. But if you actually like the show, then please give it a thumbs up. Please press the like button. It helps elevate the show in the YouTube algorithms and expose the show to new people. We're looking for new people, and always good to grow the show and grow the audience and get more and more people exposed to these ideas. There are very few other channels on YouTube for them to be exposed to the ideas. So help do that by voting up the show, by liking the show, and and of course, if you're not a subscriber to the show, please press subscribe and press that little bell, and that bell will you'll find out when I go live, and you'll be able to join us when we go live. All right, we've already got 2 people who dislike the show. So that's, I expect, as I said, many more than that. Of course, you can use the Super Chat feature on YouTube to ask questions about the topic of today or ask questions about anything else. The more you contribute on the Super Chat, the more likely it is I will get to your question today. The more you contribute on the Super Chat, the sooner I will answer your question, although questions on topic will get priority. And let's see, what else? Of course, you can support the show monthly, which is my preferred, and the way you can show value for value is if you go to uronbookshow.com/support, Patreon or Subscribestar, or Locals, and you can support the show on any one of those platforms. And I'd really appreciate that. Right. All right. Let's see. Hey, people are so ignorant. Sorry, I'm reading the chat. I shouldn't read the chat. I'm going to try to ignore the chat, but people are so ignorant. The racists, in other words, are so ignorant. Unbelievable how ignorant racists are. Let's see. Yes, let's get at Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson was interviewed, I guess. Either was interviewing, or I guess he was interviewing. Maybe he was interviewed. I can't tell from the video who was interviewing him. Mark Stein, and this issue about immigration came up, but kind of in a strange kind of way. So let's take a look at this video. You can see that's Mark Stein on the left and Tucker Carlson on the right, and we can take a look at this. And I will interrupt. And, pay attention. Pay attention to the collectivism, to the tribalism, to the nativism that Tucker Carlson expresses throughout this. And we'll get to whether this implies racism as well, in spite of the fact that he's denying. Now, let me define racism. I'll define it now. I'll define it later. Just so we're clear, racism, Ayn Rand described racism as the most primitive, barbaric form of collectivism. You know what she thought of collectivism. She thought collectivism was fundamentally immoral, fundamentally antagonistic to freedom, to liberty, to capitalism. She described racism as the lowest form of collectivism, and I agree with her. I think it's one of the most immoral ideas that exist out there in the world today. What is racism? Racism is judging people based on their color of their skin, or based on their ethnic background, or based on their origin, not based on their individual characteristics, not based on who and what they are, but based on some attribute that relates them to other people who have this attribute, an attribute that is insignificant to their character, attribute that's insignificant to their ability as an individual. It is the opposite of treating people as individuals. It's a form of collectivism, treating people as a group, not as individuals. And in this case, treating people as a group based on the least important characteristic of a group, that is their genetic origin, color of skin, proxied for by color of skin. That is what racism is. That's what anybody who bemoans. Well, anyway, we're going to get to that. So let's listen to Tucker. I have to put my headphones on so I can hear this. Not that it's fun to hear Tucker, but here it is. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. There we go.
That the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world.
Now let's start. What is replacement theory? Because he talks about replacement, and he talks about the fact that if you mention replacement, people are going to go apoplectic. And yes, they are. And yes, they should. Because replacement is not just a word. It refers to a particular theory. It refers to a particular idea. It refers to the idea, first, I think, articulated in these terms by a French philosopher in the 1970s. It refers to the idea that whites, in this case white Americans, have a very low birth rate. And the white population, as a consequence, in the United States is shrinking. The native-born white population in the United States is shrinking because the birth rate is just below replacement. As a consequence, and in order to cause the white population in the United States to be a minority even faster, there is a conspiracy. Maybe it's by Democrats, maybe it's by elites, maybe it's by, I don't know, the Koch brothers, or maybe by George Soros, or maybe a combination of the Koch brothers and George Soros, but most likely by a Jewish cabal, to bring in people who are non-white to replace the white population. So the idea is whites, the white population in Europe and in Israel and in the United States is shrinking. We need and in order to accelerate that trend, immigrants are being brought in from a variety of different non-white countries and replacing whites. And this is something that is scary. This is affiliated with the idea of white genocide, which was quite popular on the right just a few years ago. That terminology has disappeared, but was quite prevalent a few years ago. And the idea is that there is this massive class of civilizations, but really it's a massive clash of races. And the white race is being replaced by non-whites. It's being replaced by non-whites within the country by the fact that blacks and Hispanics have higher birth rates than whites do. And it's being replaced externally by bringing people in through immigration. And it's being exacerbated by mixed marriages, which are offensive because they dilute whiteness, I guess. Replacement theory is a racist theory that identifies individuals based on their race, identifies groups based on their race, based on, in this case, the color of their skin, is clearly advocating for a particular race, whites, and is antagonistic towards those who have a different race, non-whites. It is clearly racist. It would argue, for example, for immigration of whites only in order to maintain the white majority in America. The emphasis is all on color of skin. The emphasis is all on so-called race of the people involved. It categorizes people, not even based on their ideas, not based on their character, not based on their work ethic, but purely based on the color of their skin, and that makes it a racist, immoral ideology. And it's not just some benign ideology. Oh, yeah, okay, so some people have this. It's an ideology that is being used or advocated for in the context of mass murder. I know of at least 3 cases of mass murder where those who committed the mass murder argued and articulated the case from the perspective of replacement theory, from the perspective of white people being replaced. Right? Whether it's the massacre of Muslims in New Zealand, where he wrote a whole manifesto where the main theme is this idea of replacement theory, and we need to fight it. And one of the ways to fight it is, of course, to kill those who are coming to replace us. Pittsburgh, where the guy decided that the replacement was being guided, the replacement was being sponsored by Jews, who were the ones bringing these over the border, the brown people over the border to replace whites, and therefore Jews had to suffer, and he went into a synagogue and murdered a bunch of Jews. El Paso, where again the manifesto of the gunman was filled with the content of replacement theory, which had to do with whites being replaced by Mexicans crossing over the border, by Hispanic immigrants, brown people replacing it. And he went into a Walmart and started shooting brown people. And of course, Charlottesville, in which white supremacists and other types of neo-Nazis walked around chanting, "You will not replace us," or as the chants evolved into and became the dominant chants, "Jews will not replace us." So clearly, replacement as a term refers to a particular theory, a theory that has animated violence, a theory that has animated people who have gone forward and committed horrific acts of violence against those that the theory claims are going to replace whites. It's not some benign theory. It's not some theoretical thing that Tucker can refer to. It's something that people are advocating. And if you go to Nick Fuentes' website, the America First Nick Fuentes, you will find him articulating exactly what replacement theory is. I mean, he chides Tucker for not being strong enough in terms of his commitment to replacement theory. But it's exactly what it means. Tucker knows exactly what it means. He's using it here knowing what it means. And you'll see in a minute he tries to backtrack from it. But he knows. He knows. So he is basically articulating a theory he knows to be racist. On prime time, Fox News, articulating as if it's nothing. Now we'll see, I'm going to replay what he just said, and we'll see how he spins it and how he tries to convince us that this is not about race, this is about voting rights. And we'll get to a discussion of whether this is about voting rights. But look, replacement theory is a racist theory. He has just said that what's going on in the world today is about replacement. He's just basically sanctioned a theory that is one of the most vile, disgusting racist theories out there. Now, he'll try to backtrack. It ain't working because even he knows it's all about race. That's what this is all about. Here we go.
That the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical.
There's a reason why they become hysterical.
If you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world.
Now, note how this is being positioned, right? This is about voting. So we're bringing in people. Now, he's spinning it about voting instead of about race, and that's going to be his argument. This is not about race, this is about voting. But he's using the terminology of the racists. He's using the terminology of the racists. Right? But what is he claiming? He's claiming that the Democrats are bringing in voters who are going to be more obedient voters. And they've been doing this for the last 40 years. Now, first, let's note that illegal immigrants don't vote in this country. They don't vote. And therefore, illegal immigrants crossing the border does not increase the number of voters for the Democratic Party. The fact is that illegals haven't been allowed to vote. There hasn't been amnesty since the 1980s. So for 35 years, there have been illegals coming in to the United States, but they can't vote. Now, it's true the Democrats would like to give them the vote, sure. And they're likely to vote Democratic because Republicans portray them as these horrific, monstrous, evil people. Of course, they're not going to vote Republican. Although, note that Trump got a good vote, good number, good percentage of Hispanics voting for him. So first, the whole issue about this voting stuff is questionable because illegals don't vote. Children, by the way, don't vote. So all this children sneaking into the country, they don't vote, right? Illegal immigrants don't vote. Immigrants ultimately become citizens, and ultimately they can vote, right? But even if you take that into account, the strategy seems to be pretty bad, right? So immigration, people complain about immigration laws. Lots of immigrants have been coming in over the last 40 years. Massive amounts of immigrants have come in. And yet the Republican Party has done phenomenally well over the last 40 years. If you think about post-World War II, or actually, if you think about since 1932, Democrats have dominated American politics. Even when Eisenhower was president, the House and Senate were Democratic. Indeed, it was rare until the 1990s for the Republicans to have a presence in the House or the Senate. So Democrats, if you just look at the electoral politics, Democrats have dominated electoral politics in the United States from 1932 until, I think, 1996. Since then, Republicans have become almost dominant. They've held the Senate and the House more frequently than Democrats. They hold state office holders, both Senates and House, more than Democrats. They hold governorships more than Democrats. Somehow Republicans have flourished in this era that was supposed to be their death. Demographics determine our fate. And therefore, demographics suggested that demographics suggest that Democrats should dominate. And yet it hasn't happened. Maybe that's because people don't vote their race. Now, it's a sad, sad situation to see the number of blacks who vote for the Democratic Party. It's just as sad to see the number of Jews who vote for the Democratic Party. And one has to ask a question of what is going on? Why is that happening? But demographics don't determine the future. What determines the future are ideas. What determines the future are ideas, policies, philosophies. Not race. So if Republicans are worried, then Republicans have to question their ideas, or their marketing, or their ability to convince. If Republicans claim they have some truth, then they should improve their ability to communicate. But this isn't about that. Republicans want to find a convenient excuse. And the convenient excuse that Republicans have found, is immigrants, racism. It's just untethered to reality.
Hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true. If this was happening in your house, if you were in sixth grade, for example, and without telling you, your parents adopted a bunch of new siblings.
The state is not your parent.
Them brand new bikes.
Other people in your country are not your siblings.
Let them stay up later and help them with their homework and gave them twice the allowance.
Is that true? Or the illegal immigrants get twice the allowance of Americans? I mean, who gets more welfare? Immigrants or American citizens? Who gets more welfare? Immigrants or American citizens? Who gets more subsidies? Immigrants or American citizens? Well, I mean, it's not even close. It's not even close. By what standard? By what standard? By what standard? Immigrants, legal or illegal, getting better benefits, getting better treatment than American citizens. In what capacity? Where? Do American citizens pay more? Is there evidence of that? But the fact that you pay into a system, does that justify that you get to steal more from that system? So your paying of taxes justifies you accessing the welfare state as much and advocating for it? Who voted in the welfare state? Was it immigrants? Maybe from Germany and France and Italy and Ireland. Who voted in the welfare system? Who voted in welfare? Immigrants? No, Americans. They voted themselves the ability to steal from some and redistribute it to others. Not immigrants. Immigrants didn't do that. The welfare state was not created by immigrants, was not voted on by immigrants. It was voted on by Americans in the 1930s and the 1960s, by European Americans. And the fact is, Brian Kaplan, the economist, has shown that immigrants pay more into the system than they get out as benefits. Even illegal immigrants pay more into the system that take out as benefits. But let's not confuse economic facts with storytelling. Because, give me a break, it's not about economics. It never was about economics. This is about race. This is about whites fearing non-whites.
Homework and gave them twice the allowance that they gave you.
Where's the twice the allowance?
You would say to your siblings, I think we're being replaced by kids that our parents love more.
So yes, are we being replaced? So people are coming in, they're getting more goodies than we are getting, they're getting more stuff than we are getting. Really? Is that the actual reality out there? It's completely made up, but it's told as like a story. And he doesn't have to give sources. He doesn't have to argue, make the claim. He doesn't have to support it with evidence. He just has to tell a story, and we'll go, yeah, who wants those immigrants are getting all of our stuff? Are they? What about all the companies that are started by immigrants? What about all the entrepreneurs who are immigrants? What about all the jobs that they do that create wealth that we all benefit from? What about all that? No, we can't talk about that. Don't confuse the issue.
And it would be kind of hard to argue against you because look at the evidence.
Where? What evidence? One piece of evidence. You haven't given us one piece of evidence. Look at the evidence. Where is it?
So this matters on a bunch of different levels, but on the most basic level, it's a voting rights question.
How is it a voting rights question?
In a democracy, one person equals one vote.
And immigrants are not one person? So immigrants are not one person. Immigrants are a collective. Your vote is being replaced by a group.
In a democracy, one person equals one vote. If you change the population, you dilute the political power of the people who live there.
Oh my God. So if you have a kid, if you have children, you're diluting Tucker Carlson's vote. Because instead of being one vote out of 350 million, now it's one vote out of 351 million. So a growing population is a bad thing because it dilutes the natives. It dilutes the natives. So he's upset because he doesn't have as big of a vote. But the fact is that even with the natives, you know, his side doesn't always win.
Change the population, you dilute the political power of the people who live there.
Do you have a right not to have your vote diluted? Where does that come from? I mean, this is complete insanity. So increasing the population is bad because it dilutes Tucker Carlson's vote. And it's still true that you have one vote, one person. It's just now there are more people, Tucker. I mean, get your act together. You don't know what you're talking about.
So every time they import a new voter...
Nobody imports people. We don't have slavery in America anymore. Every time a new immigrant, legal immigrant, by the way, legal immigrant because only legal immigrants ultimately can vote. Illegal immigrants don't vote. So every time illegal immigrants come into the United States, what happens? What happens?
I become disenfranchised as a current voter. So I don't understand why we don't understand this. I mean, everyone wants to make a racial issue out of it. Ooh, the white replacement theory. No.
That's what Nick Fuentes was very upset. Very upset. Why did Tucker have to say it's not about race when everybody knows, Nick Fuentes says, everybody knows that it's all about race. It's 100% about race. And of course, Tucker Carlson knows it's about race as well. But Nick Fuentes was very upset with Tucker Carlson. Why didn't he just leave it alone, not say anything about race? But now Tucker's trying to distance replacement theory from race. That doesn't work.
This is a voting rights question. I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate.
Wait a minute. It's not a voting rights question. It is a political power question. That's what it's about. And at the end of the day, in a mixed economy, political power matters. In a mixed economy, the group that has power gets to allocate resources towards its people. In a mixed economy, in a democracy, which is what we've become, political power matters because you can violate people's rights to favor your group, your collective. The whole framing of the debate, the whole framing of the discussion is pure collectivism. It's all about your tribe versus mine. And it's all about, I want power so that I can benefit my people, be they race, be they people who vote with me. And I want to prevent you from having power so that you can't give goodies to your people. So I don't want immigrants who might vote against me. What about this idea that the white population, a much really troubled Tucker, is shrinking relative to blacks and Hispanics? What are you going to do about that? Subsidize white babies? Penalize maybe babies that are not white? How are you going to deal with that, Tucker? There's a whole generation out there that might vote against you. What are you going to do about that?
Why should I sit back and take that? The power that I have as an American guaranteed at birth is one.
You don't have power guaranteed at birth. You don't have power over other people. That's not guaranteed for you at birth. All you get is one vote, one person. And indeed, if you think about the 19th century, and you think about how American voters were diluted in the 19th century, oh my God. The number of people coming into the country, legal immigrants coming into the country at that time, was much, much larger than today in terms of the percentage of our population. So Americans in the 19th century, their votes was, quote, diluted dramatically at the time. Imagine if we'd stopped immigration then. Where would we be today? I mean, this is so disgusting. Tucker is so disgusting. I mean, he's playing the collectivist game, the racist game that Ayn Rand warned us against. That the mixed economy was inevitably going to lead us towards more collectivism, more racism.
Vote, and they're diluting it. No, they're not allowed to do that. Why?
Well, it turns out they are allowed to do that, and they are doing it whether Tucker Carlson likes it or not. So, this is the consequence of the mixed economy. What we get are gangs, tribes, collectives that will go to any means to protect themselves. And as Ayn Rand pointed out, the most primitive form of all collectivism is racism, and it has to deteriorate into racism. We're seeing that on the left with critical race theory, with the emphasis on skin color, with the emphasis on so-called multiculturalism. And we're seeing it on the right with this fear of replacement, fear of people with darker skin than you have. We're seeing racism become the dominant factor in American politics today, both on the right and on the left. This is Tucker Carlson. This is not some fringe group. This is not all of you telling me, oh, race, white supremacists, they're a marginal group. This is Tucker Carlson acknowledging a major racist theory of those fringe groups called replacement theory, embracing it and saying, it's a non-brainer. Of course it's happening. And taking on. Somebody says in the chat, Rand advocated for a test in order to vote. I'd like you to show me where she advocates for that. Just give me a quote. Just a page number in a book, in an essay. Love to see it. Because I've read, I think, most of what she's written. I never saw that. Now, I've advocated for a test in order to vote, but I don't remember Ayn Rand ever mentioning that. So I'm curious, psycho speak, where that comes from. You know, people talk for Ayn Rand, in Ayn Rand's name and have no clue. Unfortunately, there's no question period at the end of what you wrote. Rand advocated for a test in order to vote. There's no question mark there. So you know, if you're gonna claim that Ayn Rand says something, then bring it forward, right? Yeah, you have no clue. That's absolutely right. Now, I've advocated for a test to vote, but that's irrelevant to this issue. All right, let me take these off. All right, questions. Happy to answer any questions you have on any of this. Unfortunately, I think the issue of immigration has become an issue of race. I don't think Tucker Carlson would be objecting if we were getting a significant flow of immigrants from Europe, even if those immigrants happen to be leftists, which you would expect them to be if they're coming from Europe, because Europe is a pretty leftist place. So I think it's very much become an issue of race. If you want to ask a question, I see there are a number of questions out there. Feel free to ask in the super chat. I'll be happy to answer any question you have about citizenship, about anything. Let me just see if we have any questions related to what we're talking about. Is Tucker theory a result of put peddling, people wanting control of the government gun against fellow citizens, Americans versus America on display? Yes. I mean, to a large extent, it's what Yes, it's absolutely that. It's the logic that what Ayn Rand said, that the mixed economy, the poor peddling, inevitably leads people to form collective gangs, to form tribes, and to try to exclude other people from the tribe. And in this case, you want to exclude foreigners from the tribe because you get to distribute the goodies. You get to distribute the power. And a lot of it is about goodies, welfare, subsidies, and so on. But a lot of it's just about sheer power. It's about control over other people. And I want my gang to have control of other people, not your gang. A culture that is focused on individualism, on individual rights, a culture that is focused on, not caring whether an immigrant, what the color of the skin of an immigrant is or where he comes from, but about whether he can get a job and where they can support himself and where they can be productive. A culture like that doesn't worry about diluting your vote. Indeed, a proper capitalist country doesn't worry too much about the vote. You only worry about the vote in a democracy, in a mixed economy, where some group can actively engage in theft of another group. And a culture of individualists would crush any other culture out there. Race doesn't exist. It's a fictitious creation of those who would like to discriminate against people who look different than them. So they create some category, which is for the most part arbitrary, of race in order to help categorize the in-group versus the out-groups, in order to categorize their own collective. And then they come up with all kinds of statistics to show the superiority or the differences between that collective and this collective. And then they have grievances about that collective and this collective. And you can see that on left and right. You can see that all over critical race theory, where the speakers say, oh, we think race is a social construct, but let me explain why race is the most important thing in the world right now. Right? And why, it's all about racial grievances. And on the right, it's the same thing. Let me show how whites are superior to all those others so we can huddle together as whites. But that's just barbarism, and primitivism, and anti-everything that has made the world great. What has made the world great is treating individuals as individuals. What has made the world great is respect for reason, not for color of skin. Respect for ideas and achievements, not for ethnic, tribal association. So, we can talk about how to construct a proper immigration system. You can talk about how to have a proper voting system. And I've advocated for tests for citizenships and tests for voting, so tests for citizenship even for Americans, even for people born in America. You shouldn't just be allowed to vote just because you happen to be born in this country. I mean, that's my view, right? I don't think that's part of objectivism. But you should have a basic understanding of the system of government in which you're voting in order to be able to vote. You should have a basic understanding of the system of government and how it functions in order to become a citizen. So I don't think voting in a free country is that important. So the only thing, the key here is that capitalism, freedom, liberty cannot win unless we recapture unless we re-engage with the idea of individualism, of the value of individuals. And the fact that all that exists in a fundamental sense are individuals. Until we completely negate the idea of race, completely negate the idea of collectives. All you have to do is look at history and see how pathetically awful collectivist cultures are. How pathetically awful individuals who advocate for collectivism and racism are. If you gain pride from the color of your skin, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to achieve happiness. You're not going to achieve much. All right. Let's look at this, see if there's anything else on this topic in terms of questions. All right, let's take the super chat, the $20 and up super chat questions. What prevents a nuclear weapon black market from forming? What would the global reaction actually be to North Korea selling nukes to Iran? Would anyone today have the backbone needed to act? So there is an attempt. There have been many attempts at black market nukes. Indeed, the way North Korea got nukes is by buying plans, from in the black market, probably from Pakistan. And the way Iran has been developed its nukes is primarily from the same source, from Pakistan. Pakistan developed nukes years ago, again, by stealing different plans from different countries, and so there's always been there's a black market in uranium, there's a black market in nuclear materials, but it's very hard to transport nuclear bombs, in spite of the myth of the suitcase nuclear bomb, in spite of all the movies, the James Bond-like movies that are being made. Nuclear bombs are complex to make, they're complex to transport, they're radioactive, they're relatively easily detectable. Countries that have nukes have very carefully monitored those nukes and where they have in the nuclear material, so that we can track if some is missing, and those are being tracked down when they have gone missing by intelligence agencies. But yeah, there have been lots of attempts, including by terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, to purchase nuclear weapons. It's just very hard to do. Intelligence agencies like the CIA and like the Mossad spend a lot of their time trying to track that down and trying to stop it from happening. Somebody says that the Pakistanis hate Iran. Yeah, but at the end of the day, they're both Muslims, in spite of the fact that the one is Sunni and the one is Shiite. And for the right price, the Pakistani nuclear scientists were willing to share their information that they have with the Iranians, and it's pretty well documented that that is exactly what happened. Even the name of the nuclear scientist in Pakistan who did this is well known. And the same with North Korea. North Korea has tried to sell its plans and sell its nukes to whoever is willing to buy them. It's why there's an embargo, why every freight ship that leaves North Korea is tracked by satellite, probably monitored for radioactivity. Nobody trusts the North Koreans not to sell their nukes, right? So these things are closely monitored. And so far, the intelligence agencies have been able to stop it. Now, will they be able to succeed in the future? Who knows? Who knows? Again, nuclear weapons are a lot more difficult to build, construct, transport than what is presented in the movies. All right, we get a question here from a listener from the Czech Republic. Thank you for introducing me to objectivism, Yaron. I'm spreading the philosophy to family and friends. Good for you. I've ordered Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead and will be reading them soon. By the way, have you visited Prague? Yes, I have, many times. I've spoken in Prague. I've given talks in Prague. There's actually a small objectivist community in Prague. So I don't know if they have a meetup. I don't know how you can get in touch with them. But you might want to keep an eye out. There's definitely an objectivist community, an Ayn Rand community, Ayn Rand fan community in Prague. So, as soon as all the restrictions are lifted, I'm sure that one of the first places in Europe that I will be visiting and doing an event with will be Prague. There is an institute in Prague called, I think it's Severo, right in the center of Prague in the old city. They have a building there. It's a university, and they actually have a program in which part of the program they teach objectivism. There's a woman there who's Hungarian, but she teaches objectivism at this program, and the whole university is kind of run by libertarian types and free market types, and so I expect that I will be visiting Prague in the next 12 months. So if you're listening right now, just stay tuned to my website. My website lists all my talks. The Ayn Rand Institute website, which lists all the talks, and the show will announce where I'm going to be speaking, and hopefully we can meet up someday in Prague, in the Czech Republic. All right. I don't think we will ever change the fears of the left or the right. We should use their fear to convince them the only answer is to limit government power, just in case the evil others get into power. I understand what you're saying. But I don't think that can work. I don't think that's real. Fear is not a motivator. And their interest in gaining power far exceeds the fear of the other party. I don't think we can use, and I don't think we'll ever be successful in that fear. I mean, we've done that a lot. So when Bush, during the 2000s, used executive order after executive order after executive order, everybody said, when Democrats get into power, they're going to use it, and it's going to make it much, much worse, and they'll use it to undermine everything that you believe in. Didn't matter. He still did the executive order. So then Obama got to be president, and he did exactly that. He took what Bush did as executive orders and multiplied it and did more. And everybody said, but if you do that, Republicans will do even more. So Trump came in, and the same thing with the filibuster. When Republicans, when Democrats first limited the filibuster for, I forget what they limited it for, and then Republicans did it, and now Democrats want to do it. And every time they do it, they say, but the other side is going to get into power one day, and they will use it to get their agenda across. They don't care. Politicians don't think long term. Voters don't think long term. They don't have a long-term perspective. They don't have a long-term perspective. And as a consequence, they just want the power and they just want to use it now. Somebody says, do you think Tucker really believes all this? I don't know what Tucker believes. I mean, he used to be, what would you call it, free market oriented, kind of libertarian oriented. He admits it. And he's become a nationalist. He's become a conservative nationalist, flirting with real racism. I don't know if you saw the show he did that I commented on about what makes America great. What makes America great is basically religion and the scenery, nature. Does he believe that? The Tucker Carlson of 10 years ago didn't believe it. I think he does. I think he's been converted. I think his cognitive abilities have been undermined by ideology he has accepted, and maybe accepted it cynically, maybe accepted the ideology because he thought it was the road to power. But once you accept an ideology for those reasons, it starts infiltrating into everything you think. And if you look at Tucker Carlson's show, it is consistently anti-market, anti-capitalism, anti-individualism, anti-American. I mean, that's the one thing that is consistently Tucker. It's the anti-Americanism, if you understand Americanism, anti-founding fathers, He has to believe in it, otherwise I don't think he could be this consistent. I don't think he could be this consistent. So yes, I think Tucker does believe it, and he is he's a complete power luster. He is a complete, now has become a complete collectivist. Complete collectivist. I remember 15 years ago, I used to have some respect for him. I think Tucker is now the worst of the worst. I can't think of anybody worse than him. He's the equivalent of the worst that MSNBC has on the left. Somebody asked if Douglas Murray agrees with Tucker Carlson. I don't think so. I think Douglas Murray, while sharing some of the issues with Tucker Carlson, is a much better thinker, much more nuanced thinker, but still has real collectivist issues. Real collectivist issues. All right, let's see. Other questions? Let's see. What did I do here? Did the wrong thing, sorry. Let's do that. All right. Let's see. I understand your objection to the label Karen, but there is a societal problem with placating complainers who want to bend others to their weaknesses. I agree completely. We live in a culture of victimhood. I mean, what was Tucker Carlson just doing? He was playing the victim. He was playing the victim in a way that suggested that, my vote is being diluted. Don't do this. Don't bring in those brown people because they will dilute my vote. That's victimhood. And I think that you see that all over the place. You see, unfortunately, you see it on the left with, again, critical race theory. Oh my God, we don't have as much money as whites. You've got to help us, and it's all a consequence of the fact that we've been oppressed and we've been... Now, and there's elements of truth there. But it's what they lead with is I'm a victim. It's not my responsibility. I can't help myself. I can't make things better. I can't improve my world. I'm just a victim of the status quo. I'm a victim of the elites. I'm a victim of the powerful. I'm a victim of history. And the only way to resolve my status of a victim is to penalize those people who have something and give it to me. And give it to me. So I agree completely. We live in a how would you call it? In where need is the standard. Neediness is the standard. Neediness gets the microphone. Victimhood, a culture of victimhood. And the left and right, you lose an election, oh my God, they stole it. I'm the victim. Those really, really, really smart, sophisticated, stupid, idiotic Democrats, they stole the election. Right? That is a real problem. The victimhood mentality. What did Aristotle mean by man having a second nature? I don't know. Not an expert on Aristotle. That's a good question to ask next time I have Greg on the show. You say we're going to win in the long run, but do you think the West is less altruistic since the publication of Atlas Shrugged? Judging by people's reactions to these lockdowns, altruism is alive and well. Altruism is definitely alive and well. I complain about that all the time. I mean, constantly. Why is it that victims get so much credit? Why is it that we live in a society where victims get all the attention that they get? Altruism drives that, right? So absolutely, it's not a question of is the culture better than before Atlas Shrugged was published. No, it's not better. But are they more individualists today? More people who understand the philosophy of individualism? Yes. And it's time before there's a critical mass. It's time before there's a critical mass of people who understand the issues related to individualism, can articulate the argument, and go out there and change the world and apply it. There's a competition right now as the culture deteriorates into more collectivism, more racism, more altruism, and they're all tied up together. And the rise of individualism as more and more people become more and more individualistic. And then the question is, which dominates? So far, the deterioration in the culture is the dominant aspect of what's going on. But at some point, I think there'll be a tipping point. At some point, there'll be enough people advocating and believing in reason and individualism to start tipping the culture in a different direction. Now, granted, it's speculation. Certainly, if I want to give timing on it, it's speculation. It's going to take decades. But I believe truth wins out in the end. And altruism is false, but it could take 1,000 years. I don't know how long it will take. But at the end, because altruism is false, because collectivism is false, they will lose. At some point. All right, before you leave today, I'd appreciate if you would like the show. Huge benefit for the YouTube algorithms that have suppressed me anyway. It would be nice if we could give them a bit of a kick to help promote the show and get it out there and get it to new people who typically don't listen, who just don't come across the show. Liking the show helps that. Don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, to subscribe to the show, and you will get therefore notified every time there is the show goes live. Again, if you want to get my attention, if you want to ask a question, if you want to just support the show, if you like the show, if you disagree with all the complainers on the chat, then please show your support by using the super chat on here or by going to ronbrookshow.com/support and making a monthly contribution or making a one-time contribution to the show. That's how we finance, that's how we fund this show, is through your support. But it's more than financing. The fact that you guys are supporting the show financially basically means that this is a value, that there's a real value out there. If you guys stop supporting it financially, I'll stop doing it, because what's the point, right? More than the viewership, more than the hours watched, the real measure of the value created in the show is the amount of financial support you guys supply. So if you value what I'm doing, please show it by providing value for value, either contributing through the super chat or through the monthly contribution. Today we're significantly off our daily goal, our show goal of raising about $400 off of the super chat, but we raised a lot of money yesterday, well over $1,000 yesterday. So I won't bug you too badly today. But we are probably short of about 250 from our goal of 400. So if anybody wants to contribute towards the 400, go ahead. Now's your opportunity. I've got a few more Super Chat questions. None of them are $20 or more. So if you come in with a $20 or more, you will get priority. Do you like the term never again when it comes to the Shoah? What is Remembrance Day like in Israel? I mean, there's a sense in which I like never again if people understand what it means. Because I think it's broader than just never have another Holocaust. It means never tolerate evil, never stay quiet in the face of evil, never pretend that evil isn't what it really is. And in that sense, that's how I take never again. And never will you allow yourself to be walked in. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the support. I really appreciate it. Thank you also to Noel and to Mike for their support. They didn't ask a question, but they did give a $20+ contribution. So I do like the term, but I think it should have a much broader meaning than what it typically just means, never have another Holocaust. What is Remembrance Day like in Israel? It's It's a very solemn day. There is a siren that goes off, and everybody has a minute or two, I can't remember, of silence. So cars stop in the street, people get out of their cars, they stand. Television is dominated by programming around the Holocaust. Now, well, what I'm telling you right now is how it was in my childhood, or until I left Israel when I was 26. So I don't know what it's like today. I assume it's the same way, but I don't know. You get a lot of shows on television about the Holocaust. A lot of sad music on the radio. So it's a very contemplative, a very solemn day in Israel. I saw the link. I guess I'll watch it. I guess I was wrong. Ayn Rand did say there should be a test. I don't disagree with that. As I said, I've often argued for a test. And I'll watch the video and I'll comment on it if I think there's a need for comment. But yes, Psycho Speak, who often speaks nonsense, this time actually provided proof of what he says. So good for him. He was right. I was wrong. But again, it's not an ideological issue because, as I said originally, I support a test for voting and for citizenship. And it's not just a reading test and a competency test. You have to understand the principles on which you are voting. So there has to be an understanding of of the system of government that is the United States. Ryan writes, I value Iran. People go sign up for a monthly. Yeah, go sign up for a monthly contribution. To me, it's easy. Even small amounts, even $2 a month is great. Anything you can do, the number of people who support the show, the amount of money that supports the show, that is what keeps the show going. It's not anything else. It's your support, your expressing the fact that you value this. Just showing up and listening doesn't express the value. It's actually putting your money where your mouth is that express the value. Okay, doesn't torture violate the Eighth Amendment's clause against cruel and unusual punishment? The founders were aware that giving government power to sadists, to sadistic things in prisons doesn't end well. Yes, I agree, and it does. And that's why it's probably would never be allowed domestically. War, I don't think, falls under the Eighth Amendment. What you do in war, I don't think so. But you have to recognize that there are certainly emergency situations where a certain person has information that could save the lives of your loved ones, and there's no way to get that information other than by shooting in the kneecaps. I, for one, am going to shoot him in the kneecaps, even if it turns out it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment. And I think that you'd expect that the courts afterwards would treat me well, as long as it was true that this person was really as evil and had the kind of information that would have led to the kind of death and destruction that I would argue for. I'm not going to argue that torture should be legal like any other thing. I think it should be, in the context of war and in the context of non-war, it should be something truly exceptional, left only for situations of emergencies, and should still be supervised by the judiciary in a sense that you should have to face a judge afterwards and be able to, or a jury, and be able to prove that what you did was reasonable and necessary. James writes, here's $20 for my $5 and $2 questions. Enjoy the weather in Puerto Rico. What are your thoughts on living in Tampa? I'm not a huge fan of Tampa. Tampa's kind of, I don't know. It's pretty, but it's hot and humid. And I have no real thoughts about living in Tampa. Florida's not my favorite place to live, but I understand why people live there because the weather's relatively good, and it's a relatively free state, one of the freest in the country, and it's new, it's clean, I've never lived in Tampa. I visited Tampa, but I've never lived in Tampa. I don't really have any strong thoughts one way or the other. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Any other $20 questions? No. Doesn't torture... we did the torture one. Joanna, I look forward to you interviewing the Nomad Capitalist. I hope to do that one of these days. I have lost faith in America. Neither party wants freedom, and both hate capitalism. I agree that both parties reject freedom and both parties hate capitalism. Absolutely. And Tucker Carlson is a good illustration of what the Republicans or the right wants, and we know how bad the left is. It's all we have left. Regarding torture, Hugo's Hunchback novel has the gypsy girl tortured into confession to a murdering a soldier. It is a lie, but she has to pay for the crime. Yeah, I mean, often people will use lies in order to avoid torture. Right? I mean, it's not like torture supplies you necessarily with truth. It's just that it's a last resort. In some situations, there's no alternative. Mike asked, what are your thoughts on the Derek Chauvin trial? I mean, so far it appears, and I'm not an expert and I haven't monitored it closely, but it appears like it's following, if you will, the rule of law. It seems like they got experts from both sides. They'll bring them in. They're discussing them. They've got a jury. Hopefully, the jury is not swayed by irrationality and emotion. Hopefully, they stick to the facts. So far, the facts seem to suggest that Derek Chauvin did indeed use what I'd call excessive force. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest. I haven't seen any evidence. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean it hasn't been presented because I haven't tracked everything. That Derek Chauvin is or isn't a racist. I don't know one way or the other, but it does look like he used excessive force and killed George Floyd for no good reason. That's what the evidence so far shows. But I think the defense hasn't argued yet, so it's going to be interesting to see what the defense says and how you compare the kind of expert witnesses that the prosecution had and what the defense has. And so I think it's way too early to say, but the system seems to be working. That is, the system as it is seems to be working through the motions of what it means to have a trial and to try to come to an objective standard, right? I mean, the evidence presented by experts so far did not suggest that Floyd died of ingestion of fentanyl. That is what the experts so far have testified. Now, again, when the defense witnesses come forward and present their evidence, we'll see, what if they present arguments that it was the fentanyl that killed him. But the experts for the government seem to suggest that it was not, that it was the knee on the neck that actually killed George Floyd. Why are China and Russia both going after their past territories that are free countries at the same time? Will America help Taiwan or Ukraine? Is there going to be a war in 2022? Well, I mean, both countries have grand ambitions. I mean, Russia, in some sense, is grander than China's. Putin has often stated that he would like to reform the Soviet Union. China wants what it considers its territories back, territories that it held for a very long time, and that Taiwan spun off due to civil war, and Hong Kong was a product of a treaty with Britain because of a war that China lost. So it wants those territories back. China has not expressed interest in expansion beyond Taiwan and Hong Kong. Russia, though, wants all of its former so-called republics to be unified under the Soviet Union. So in that sense, Russia's ambitions are far greater than China's. Will there be a war in 2022? Maybe in Ukraine. I don't think that China is ready yet to take Taiwan. I don't think they're ready to engage in a war with the United States over Taiwan. I don't think they want those consequences. I think they're biding their time for the United States to be even weaker than it is today, or to be distracted by something else, or for something else to happen, maybe another financial crisis, to then use that against. So I don't expect a war with China. 2022, you might see over the next year and a half a war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. That wouldn't surprise me. Russia's getting desperate. Their economy is struggling. Putin is less popular. Usually regimes that are desperate like that seek out wars. I don't think the United States would intervene on the side of Ukraine, but you can expect a war like that to be fairly bloody. Russia has a stronger military force, but it's not clear it really wants an engagement with Ukraine right now. And it's not clear what the Europeans will do. I mean, what Europeans in America will do will support the Ukrainian forces, but I don't think they'll send troops themselves. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So what's the possibility of a war in Ukraine? I don't know, 30%, 40%, hard to tell. I'm curious about your thoughts of declaring bankruptcy. Is it moral or should be allowed? I think it is moral. There's nothing wrong with declaring that you can't pay back your debts and therefore having the court help you restructure your assets so that you can pay some of those debts and move forward. I'm not a big believer in debtor's prison. I do think bankruptcy laws are too lenient today, too friendly towards the debtor, not the person who gives out the debt. But it doesn't seem to prevent borrowing out there. It doesn't seem to prevent a robust credit market. So it strikes me that they're probably not overly, it's not crazily lenient. So I'm generally for a legal methodology to be able to address, with penalty. So it's not like bankruptcy should be neutral. Your credit gets destroyed. I might talk about that tomorrow because the Biden administration has some weird proposals about this. But your credit gets destroyed. It's hard for you to get credit again. You have to pay off some of your debt, if not all of your debt. And then, of course, at the corporate level, there are different bankruptcy laws. There's Chapter 7 and Chapter 11. And we can talk about that sometimes, or maybe we can do a show about bankruptcy. But generally, I think that having some framework, legal framework, in which you can settle those disputes and have them use the legal system to prioritize them and to come out of it is a good methodology. I do think it's too lenient today, particularly on individuals, but I think it's the right kind of framework. Nomad Capitalist says Singapore is free economically. However, socially it is not as free. Are there any places that are moving towards freedom in both? Hard to tell. I would have said before COVID New Zealand, but I'm not sure. And New Zealand over the last couple of years has had a relatively socialist prime minister that's moved it away from. I would have said maybe Australia, but look at what they've done under COVID. It's been a disaster. Maybe you could argue that places like Estonia, some Eastern European countries, former Soviet countries, are certainly moving to become freer, both economically and culturally, but they started out so behind, so it's not like they've caught up yet, right? So it's just, look up the economic freedom indexes. There are two of them. There's one by the Heritage Foundation, one by Cato. And there is also a Freedom House Free Country Index, which measures more of the cultural, social issues. And you can see the kind of overlap. I mean, Switzerland is basically, freer economically and freer culturally than much of the rest of the world. Is being a salesman a necessary component of being a capitalist? No, I mean, you can be a capitalist or businessman and delegate the responsibility for sales to somebody else. So you yourself don't have to be a salesman. I can think of many CEOs who were not salesmen themselves, but who delegated it. Okay, we got our last Super Chat question. So you've got a couple of minutes left to support the show or to ask a question. But any contributions right now would be appreciated. What happened to all the likes? That's weird. They kind of went down in a weird kind of way. But don't forget to like the show before you leave. We've got 142 people watching and 68 likes, but that's strange because there were over 100 likes earlier, and I don't think you can undo likes, so I don't know what happened there. That's weird. Okay, so please like the show before you leave, and get that number over 100. It should be well over 100. It really helps with the algorithms. Of course, if you don't like the show, then then don't press the like button, obviously. The little GOP optimism, I'm active on campus, and in conversations on campus, I've seen a lot of them be receptive to Representative Massey types, and it's looking good. These racists come to the GOP, they can leave. Well, let's hope so. I hope you're right. I mean, one of the sad things for the GOP was Justin Amash having to leave or leaving the GOP. That's the kind of GOP I'd like to see, although I disagree with him on foreign policy. I agree with him on so much more. Massey is a second best to Justin Amash, but at least better. At least sticks to economic liberty, and I don't think is a racist, really. So I'd like to see more of that. I think the immigration issue is really key, to the extent to which they are viciously hostile to immigration, on principle, not just because it's a welfare state, but on principle, because of this idea that it dilutes people. That is a vicious view, right? That it dilutes the race. And hopefully in the future there'll be fewer and fewer of those in the GOP among young people, because I think young people generally are less racist to older people, although the popularity of Nick Fuentes, who is clearly a racist and an anti-Semite, is a little scary. The fact that he is so popular. Racist smears. I don't think I've racially smeared anybody. I provide facts. All right, everybody. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. There's clearly should be well over 100 likes. I'm not sure what happened there. Somehow, I think YouTube deleted like a bunch of likes. So if you liked the show before and it might have been kind of evaporated somehow, then go like it again just to make sure that your like counts. So thank you all. Stefan asked, back in the 1980s, the photo forums, Leonard was constantly asked about the Atlas movie. Why did it never get made? Well, it was made, but it was made into a terrible 3-part series. And the movies are terrible, so please don't go watch them. There's still rumors about it being made better. Let's hope one day we'll get a good Atlas Shrugged movie. The main reason it isn't made is because it's hard to make it. And the really, really flawed attempt to make it, which resulted in an awful movie, is a good illustration of why it's so hard to make it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow